Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the edges of a wedding, back to clay jars filled with nothing, back to where joy had quietly run dry. You're not in a church, you're not in a cathedral, you're tucked beneath a canopy of starlight where angels lean in just to hear what happens next. You're surrounded by the subtle pulse of heaven like a heartbeat in the silence. And tonight you're going to witness something that doesn't roar, it whispers, something you almost missed. This first miracle of Jesus, it's soft, almost shy. A celebration on the brink of embarrassment, a mother's quiet nudge, and the Son of God turning water to wine behind the scenes. You probably won't survive this unless you've got wings or a direct line to the Almighty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at Cana, the sun is settling, dipping into a gold horizon. The wedding's been lively, laughter bouncing off stone walls, music humming through grapevine trellises. The air smells of roasted lamb and honeyed figs. Everyone's been feasting, dancing unburdened. But then it happens too soon, too quietly. The wine runs out. Panic doesn't rush the scene, it trickles. The host's smile falters, servants whisper. The bride's mother glances at the groom, already pale with anxiety. It's not just about drinks, it's about shame. Hospitality in this culture is sacred. Running out of wine isn't a mistake, it's a mark. You watch Mary. She doesn't fidget, doesn't wring her hands. She walks to Jesus, her son, yes, but also something more. She doesn't plead. She simply states, "They have no wine." It's one of the most understated lines in all of Scripture, but under the surface it crackles. Jesus replies, "A little cryptic woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." It sounds like a no, a brush off. But Mary turns to the servants anyway, her voice calm but commanding, "Do whatever he tells you." You almost laugh, this is classic mom faith. She's not asking, she's expecting. And Jesus, he gives no grand speech. He doesn't wave his hands or summon thunder. He just nods towards 6 stone jars each, enormous, each used for ceremonial washing. Not wine containers, not sacred vessels, just everyday purification jars. "Fill them with water," he says. Now imagine being one of the servants. You're holding a clay pitcher, wondering how water and washing jars will fix a wine problem. But you do it. You fill the jars to the brim, still water, still confusion. Then he says, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." No lightning, no sparkle, just obedience. The master of the feast tastes it. His eyebrows lift. He grins. He calls over the groom and says the line, "You remember, everyone serves the good wine first, but you've kept the good wine until now." Laughter returns. Music rises. No one knows what just happened, but Mary does. The servants do, and you do. This wasn't about wine. It wasn't even really about the wedding. It was about transformation, quiet transformation. Jesus didn't make something from nothing. He made something sacred out of something ordinary. Water, basic, boring, necessary, became joy. It became wine. And those jars used for purification rituals. He filled those. He chose the containers linked to old law, old customs, old efforts to become clean. Then he filled them with something new. He didn't abolish the old. He infused it with grace. There's a curious detail tucked in here. Some theologians point out that Jesus didn't touch the water, didn't even speak to it. His will alone, expressed through action, was enough to bring about the miracle. Others note the quantity, roughly 120 to 180 gallons of wine. That's a lot. It's lavish, over the top. One scholar suggests this was an echo of messianic prophecies in Isaiah and Amos, where an abundance of wine symbolized the arrival of God's kingdom. But why didn't Jesus make a scene? Why didn't he stand on a table and shout, "I, the Son of God, bring you divine Pinot Noir"? Because sometimes the greatest miracles happen off stage. You won't hear trumpets every time heaven moves. You won't always see the glow. Some of God's most powerful work in your life will happen while you're distracted by dinner or halfway through dancing with your sandals off. And here's something softer still, a lesser-known curiosity. Some ancient Christian traditions say this wedding was a relative's, maybe even one of Jesus' own cousins, which makes Mary's confidence all the more striking. She wasn't just being polite, she knew this was the moment. The first step onto a divine stage, even if the spotlight never swung his way. But not everyone agrees. Some scholars suggest this miracle wasn't just a favor, it was an intentional signal. A beginning. The jars, the wine, the abundance, they're all symbolic. Not a coincidence, but a declaration. The old rituals are full now, and overflowing. And yet others argue this was just compassion, a kindness, not a theological mic drop. Maybe it was both. All we know for sure is the first miracle of Jesus was silent, seamless, and unnoticed by most. Which makes you wonder, how many miracles in your life looked just like that? How many water-to-wine moments have slipped by while you were too busy sipping? How many jars are you carrying right now thinking they're too ordinary, too heavy, too unholy when they're about to overflow? So you drift now, picturing a courtyard glowing under strings of oil lamps. Somewhere a servant is still marveling over a cup. Somewhere Mary is smiling that knowing smile. And somewhere Jesus is slipping back into the crowd mission begun not with fire but with flavor. The scene changes, the crowd shifts, and now you're moving through narrow streets laced with dust and incense. The smell of spices follows you, cinnamon, myrrh, and something like warm bread. You're weaving through the bustle of a market where the loudest voices win, and yet you're drawn to a hush in the air. There's a woman there. She's pressing through the crowd like her life depends on it. And in truth it does. She's not named. That's important, because tonight she could be anyone, even you. 12 years. That's how long she's been bleeding. A private illness, a public shame. She's been to every doctor, spent every coin. She's lived isolated, unclean by every spiritual rule of the time. Untouchable. Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, communally. No one hugs her. No one sits beside her. Her world has shrunk to silence. But she's heard whispers about him, about the healer who doesn't flinch, the rabbi who touches lepers, the man whose voice calms demons and storms alike. So she comes, weak bent, almost crawling. She doesn't want a scene. She doesn't want a meeting. She wants a touch, not even his hand, just the edge of his garment, that's all. If I just touch his cloak, she thinks I'll be healed. Now pause, let that sink into your chest. She doesn't say if he touches me. She says if I touch him. Faith doesn't always wait for permission. You watch her slip through the crowd, eyes wide and wild with hope. She reaches just barely, and her fingers graze the hem of his cloak. Not even his skin, just a tassel. And that's when it happens. The pain stops, instantly. Her breath catches. Something invisible but electric courses through her. She's whole, for the first time in over a decade. And Jesus, he stops. That alone is a miracle. He stops in the middle of a crush of bodies. He says, "Who touched me?" The disciples laugh. Everyone's touching you, we're in a crowd. But Jesus isn't joking. Power has gone out from me, he says. That phrase, let it hum inside your mind. Power has gone out. That means something real passed from him to her. Not an idea, not a nice thought, but spiritual current. Like heaven's voltage moved through cloth. She steps forward, trembling. She admits it. Everyone turns to look, and he could have scolded her. Could have said, "You broke purity laws. You risked defiling me." Instead, he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." He calls her daughter. It's the only time in the Gospels Jesus uses that word for someone. And he uses it here for a woman who thought she wasn't even worthy of eye contact. There's a theological mystery scholars debate over this moment. Some say the healing happened the second she touched him, independent of his will. Others say no, Jesus was fully aware, but chose this moment to illustrate personal faith. And then there's a third view that this story was meant to reveal the interactive nature of faith and divinity. You move toward him, and heaven meets you halfway. And here's something you probably never heard in Sunday school. That hem she touched, it's likely his tzitzit, a knotted fringe worn by observant Jews to remind them of God's commands. The fringe of holiness, the very edge of divine instruction. She reached for the law and got the life. And remember, she wasn't his intended destination. Jesus was on his way to heal someone else entirely. But he paused for her as if to say God doesn't get too busy for the one who believes quietly. There's a soft joke here hiding in the folds. The disciples think Jesus is being overly dramatic. They treat him like a celebrity annoyed by fans. But Jesus isn't irritated, he's interested. While they're counting elbows, he's feeling the shift in the spirit. Maybe that's your story too. Maybe you feel lost in the crowd. Maybe your prayers feel like whispers under the shouting of more urgent needs. But hear this, he stops for you. He feels when faith brushes against him, even softly, even shyly. And here's what's beautiful, the woman didn't need a lecture. She didn't need a ritual. She didn't even need a name. She just needed a second of skin and soul alignment, a tiny overlap between desperation and belief. And now she's healed, but not just physically. Her healing is public. That matters. Because her pain was public too. Her shame was known. So Jesus makes sure her healing is seen. This wasn't just a private fix, it was restoration to the community. You feel that now like a river running below your ribs. The truth that God doesn't just want to mend your body, He wants to restore your place at the table. Some scholars wonder if this miracle is meant to contrast the next one, because right after this, Jesus brings Jairus' daughter back to life. That girl was 12 years old. This woman had suffered for 12 years. Coincidence, maybe. But it also reads like divine choreography. One girl's life begins after 12 years. Another woman's torment ends after 12. It's almost like Jesus is conducting a harmony in time, bringing one life full circle while lifting another from the pit. And now the crowd fades again. You sit under the fig tree with your knees drawn to your chest. The hem of his garment still lingers in your mind, like the scent of crushed frankincense. You imagine yourself in that moment. Would you have dared to reach? And if not, would you at least have watched her do it? Because tonight someone did, and the world changed for one woman in one crowd with one touch. You're still in the crowd, but it thins like mist, now melting into a slower moment. The noise fades, the movement hushes. Someone is running not toward Jesus this time, but away, weaving urgently through streets lined with stone houses and clay rooftops. His robe flaps behind him, dust chokes his sandals. This is Jairus, a synagogue leader, respected, upright, and desperate. His daughter is dying. You see it in his face. He's the kind of man who rarely begs, but today pride has left him behind. He falls at Jesus' feet right there in public and pleads, "My little girl is dying. Come lay your hands on her so she'll live." Jesus doesn't ask questions. He simply begins walking. It's the same journey where, remember, the woman reached out from behind. That was the interruption. And it cost time. Time Jairus didn't have. Because while Jesus was healing her, a messenger arrived. You hear it like a dagger drawn too slowly. Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. Stop. That sentence could have ended everything. No hope, no point, it's over. But Jesus turns. His voice is low, strong, and utterly calm. Don't be afraid. Only believe. You follow them now. The house is up ahead. Mourners already wail outside, professionals even. It was common to hire them, but this sound, it doesn't feel sacred. It's loud, performative, excessive. It grates. Jesus stops again. Why all this commotion, he asks. The child isn't dead, she's just sleeping. They laugh, not gently, not awkwardly, mocking laughter. Their scorn slices through the air. You flinch a little at the cruelty of it, and yet Jesus says nothing more. He puts them out of the house. Every single one. It's not often we see Jesus clean a room like this, but here he does. Noise isn't welcome when resurrection is coming. He brings only the parents and 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John. Just them. Just trust, just presence. You step inside the quiet with them. The little girl is still, pale, cold. Her hands folded not by choice. She's 12 on the brink of blooming, and gone. Jesus kneels beside her bed. No oil, no chanting, no drama, just a phrase in Aramaic, Talitha cum. It means, little girl, I say to you, get up. But here's the divine softness. Talitha isn't just girl. It's tender, like saying sweetheart, like saying darling, it's time. And she does, she rises. No gasps, no thunder, just a quiet inhalation, just motion where there had been stillness. Her feet touch the floor, her eyes flutter open, and her parents, oh, their faces, you almost can't bear to look at them. They're crumbling and rejoicing all at once. Jesus doesn't give a sermon. He doesn't pose for a miracle selfie. He just turns to the parents and says, give her something to eat. That's how normal he wants this to be. Life returns and now it's snack time. There's a curious theological thread buried here. Why did Jesus say she was sleeping when she had clearly died? Some scholars say he was softening the blow. Others say he was declaring the truth from his perspective. Death isn't permanent to the one who holds time. And still others believe this was a direct rebuke to the loud faithlessness outside. Because faith doesn't scream, it rests. Another detail you might have missed: Jairus, the synagogue leader, would have understood the risk of associating with Jesus. Many in his position viewed Jesus as a threat. Yet in his most desperate moment, he crossed that line. This was not just a plea for healing, it was a confession of faith in action. And Jesus honored it. Let's talk about the crowd again, the people Jesus left outside. Those who laughed. Their mockery didn't stop him, but it excluded them. They saw the girl cold, but they never saw her rise. It's a lesson you carry quietly now. Not all will witness resurrection. Not because it's hidden, but because their scorn shuts them out. Remember the phrase, don't be afraid, only believe. That wasn't just for Jairus, it's for you. Maybe something in your life feels dead. Long gone. The kind of dead where people stop praying and start making peace with the loss. But Jesus doesn't flinch at finality. He walks right in, he takes it by the hand, and he says, darling, rise. Here's a lesser-known spiritual gem buried beneath the surface. The early church fathers often paralleled this story with the resurrection of the soul. The little girl's restoration was seen as an echo of what Christ would later offer all humanity. A preview, a soft foreshadow. And yet, even in this theological depth, Jesus remains human. He says, give her food. Because faith never forgets the body. He doesn't just raise her, he sustains her. That's worth remembering. We serve a God who not only awakens what's dead, but also asks if it's had dinner. And you sit now in the corner of that quiet room. The air is still warm from miracle. The girl's laugh is faint, bird-like. You watch her mother brush a strand of hair from her cheek, almost afraid to believe this is real. But it is. She's breathing, awake, hungry. And just like that, the silence has become sacred. Now you follow the shoreline barefoot, where Galilee kisses the rocks, and the world feels smaller under a pale sky. The crowd has scattered for now, no more jostling. Just the quiet rhythm of lapping waves, and the occasional cry of a gull overhead. Jesus walks ahead, eyes scanning the water. But his attention is also on something invisible, something folded deep inside the day's rhythm. You sense it before it happens. This next miracle isn't flashy. In fact, it's so easy to overlook it, almost feels like a parable wrapped in fish scales and tax forms. Peter approaches. There's tension in his stride. They're asking about the temple tax, he mutters. Do we pay or not? It sounds small, almost bureaucratic. But there's pressure underneath. The temple tax wasn't just money. It was identity, loyalty. It whispered things about belonging, about expectations. And the people watching Peter want to know, does your teacher play by the rules? Jesus responds not with protest, but with a question that sounds like it came from a dream. What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes, from their own children or from others? Peter blinks, from others. Then the children are exempt, Jesus replies. But, so that we don't cause offense, go to the lake, cast a line. The first fish you catch, open its mouth. You'll find a coin. Take it and give it to them for both of us. And that's it. A miracle so quiet you almost miss it while blinking. Peter heads down the shoreline. He casts once. And as promised, the first fish opens its mouth, and there it is. A coin. Just enough. Not too much. Not a treasure chest. Just exactly what's needed for both of them. This story doesn't get the spotlight. It's tucked away in Matthew 17, folded like parchment between louder chapters. But it hums with layered meaning. First, Jesus doesn't have to pay. He makes that clear. The Son is free in the Father's house, but he chooses not to offend. Not out of fear, but out of gentleness. He bends not because he must, but because grace is more important than pride. And then the miracle itself, what kind is it? It's not healing, not walking on water, it's provision. Unseen, precise, and strange. The coin is already in the fish, already placed, already waiting. Some scholars argue this is less a miracle and more a poetic metaphor. Maybe Peter found the coin later. Maybe Jesus meant you'll catch enough fish to sell and pay the tax. But others insist no, this was divine orchestration. A fish with a coin, at that exact moment, for that exact need. And that raises deeper spiritual questions. When did the coin enter the fish? Was it just floating in the sea, picked up at random? Or did God plant it, knowing this moment was coming? There's no thunder here, no applause, just a God who sees taxes coming and meets them quietly through nature timing in a fisherman's hand. And the coin itself, it's a stater, a silver piece worth 2 drachmas, enough for 2 men, no leftovers, no waste, just grace measured to fit the moment. There's a soft joke hiding in all this. Imagine Peter pulling that fish up and muttering, "Of course it's the first one." Maybe he squinted into the fish's mouth, wondering if it was a prank. You can almost hear Jesus chuckling from the shore. This miracle teaches something profound about divine provision. Sometimes God doesn't rain down gold, he sends you fishing. Sometimes the miracle isn't instant. It's waiting downstream beneath obedience, hidden in something as simple as, go cast a line. And Peter had to trust that. He didn't see the coin until after he moved. You may feel that now, standing with an empty hook, wondering why you've been called to cast into a sea that hasn't spoken yet. But hear this, the fish is already swimming toward you. The answer is already alive. Another spiritual curiosity fish in early Christianity became a symbol of the faith itself. So this moment where fish and provision meet isn't just about coins, it's about calling, about trusting that within your walk of faith is exactly what you'll need to keep going. It's quiet, it's strange, it's enough. And don't miss the beauty in the shared nature of the coin. It wasn't just for Peter, it was for Peter and Jesus. In that moment, he says, we're in this together. You feel that now like a warm breath on your shoulder. He doesn't send you alone, he covers you. He walks with you even into tax offices and tangled nets. And now, as the sun leans low and the water glows orange and soft gold, you see Peter coming back the coin still a little wet in his hand. He looks half bewildered, half relieved. Jesus meets him with a smile, doesn't gloat, doesn't even comment. Because sometimes God doesn't need to explain his miracles. He just hands you what you need and lets you decide how deeply to trust next time. The sea is behind you now, but you still hear it like memory echoing in your ears. The road ahead is drier, windswept with hills that roll under the horizon like folded parchment. Jesus is walking with the disciples again, but something's shifted. You can feel it. There's tension like the moment before thunder, though the sky is clear. They've just come from a long day of teaching. Dust clings to their cloaks. The sun begins to bow behind the hills. It should be peaceful, but then it happens. A storm rolls in. Not in the sky, not over the hills. In the sea again. Only this time they're already in the boat halfway across. Jesus sleeps, head resting on a cushioned face, calm breath steady. The kind of sleep you'd think only angels could afford. And outside chaos. Waves rise, wind howls, the disciples panic. These are seasoned fishermen. This isn't their first storm, but something about this one feels different. Maybe stronger, maybe darker, maybe more spiritual than physical. They try to manage it on their own, bail water, tighten sails, but it's not working. So they finally wake him, and not gently. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And there it is. The question you've probably asked yourself more than once. Don't you care? Jesus opens his eyes, stands up slowly, doesn't rush, doesn't flinch. He looks at the wind, at the water, at the chaos, and he speaks. Peace, be still. That's it. And just like that, the sea smooths like silk. The wind folds into itself. The storm folds back into silence as if embarrassed. But here's what you might have missed. No one asked him to calm the storm. They just asked if he cared. This is the miracle of divine initiative. He didn't need their perfect prayer. He responded to their fear. He didn't wait for poetic requests. He moved when their panic reached heaven's ears. That's the kind of God you're dealing with. A God who doesn't need to be convinced to intervene. Some biblical scholars suggest this moment echoes Genesis. God speaking into the chaos, taming the deep with a word. Others see a prophetic fulfillment pointing to Psalm 107. He stilled the storm to a whisper. But the most curious part is what Jesus says next. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? It almost sounds like rebuke, but the tone is softer than that. More like a parent asking why you didn't wake them sooner from the next room. Some theologians argue the disciples failed here, that they should have calmed the storm themselves. Others say their mistake wasn't waking Jesus, it was forgetting who was sleeping. Because if God rests while the waves rage, maybe the storm isn't in charge after all. There's a subtle humor in all this too. Imagine the disciples still drenched, still shivering, staring at Jesus, who's just brushing off his robe like he didn't just speak down the sea. No flashy gestures, no thunderclap encore. Just peace. Be still. As if calming weather is just part of the daily checklist. And maybe it is, because Jesus didn't stop the storm after they mastered fear. He stopped it in the middle of their panic. That's a pattern. You see it again and again. God moves not because your faith is perfect, but because his love is. But here's a detail you may not know. The original Greek for be still literally means to be muzzled, like silencing a growling beast. This wasn't just nature responding to its maker, it was something darker being subdued. Something spiritual under the surface of the storm. Which raises a deeper question. What kind of storm was this? Was it just bad weather? Or a spiritual attack? A tempest stirred by forces that knew who was on board? Some theologians lean toward the latter. The storm rises as they cross into Gentile territory, heading to a region where Jesus would confront a legion of demons. It's as if something didn't want him to arrive, and still he sleeps. You take that image into your chest now, not the storm, the sleeping savior, because here's the lesson buried in wind and water. Peace isn't the absence of storms, it's the presence of someone who isn't afraid of them. Maybe you're sailing through something right now. Maybe the waves are high and your prayers are more like screams. That's okay. Just know he's not ignoring you. He's resting because he knows the end of this story. And maybe, just maybe, he's waiting for you to remember you're in the same boat. You settle into that thought now. The sound of water is back, but it's calm, gentle, the kind that rocks you to sleep instead of rattling your nerves. You picture the disciples soaked and stunned, watching the horizon glow again with fading sunlight. And Jesus back on his cushion, maybe already asleep again? Because storms don't scare the one who carries peace in his voice. Now the boat slides against the shore like a sigh. Sand crunches beneath your feet as you step out behind Jesus' water, licking your ankles soft as breath. The crowd isn't here yet. It's just you, the disciples, and him. And somewhere nearby, people are gathering, quietly, from hills, from homes, from places even the map doesn't bother naming. You don't hear shouting, you don't hear thunder, just footsteps, dozens, then hundreds, maybe thousands, moving towards something they can't fully explain. Jesus climbs the hillside. He sits, that's all. No pulpit, no stage, just grass underfoot and open sky overhead. You watch as the crowd settles, men, women, children, elders leaning on staffs, mothers nursing babies. People who didn't come for spectacle, they came because something in them said, sit here, listen, watch. And they do. He speaks for hours. Parables, stories, silence in between. You lose track of time. The sun drops low, the air cools. That's when the problem starts. The disciples concerned whisper to him, this is a remote place and it's getting late. Send the people away so they can buy themselves some food. It makes sense, it's reasonable, logical. But Jesus shakes his head. His reply lands like a soft stone in deep water. You give them something to eat. There's a pause. You can almost hear the disciples blink. Then Andrew mutters, there's a boy here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what is that among so many? It's not enough, clearly not enough. But Jesus doesn't say, let me fix this. He says, bring it here. And that's the miracle's quiet beginning. He doesn't ask for more. He doesn't ask for perfection. He asks for what's already in your hands. Now picture the boy, small, tired, holding his food with uncertain fingers. He could have hidden it, could have eaten it alone, but he offers it, and that changes everything. Jesus takes the loaves, looks up, gives thanks. Not after they've multiplied, before. There's a deep softness here. He thanks the Father for not enough, and then he breaks it. And that's when it happens. The bread doesn't explode. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't become mountains of carbs. It just keeps showing up. Every time he breaks a piece, there's more. His hands work in rhythm. Take, bless, break, give. Over and over. It multiplies in the breaking. That's something to remember. Maybe your own life feels thin, insufficient, torn at the edges, but the breaking doesn't end you, it multiplies you. Some scholars speculate this miracle wasn't just multiplication, it was divine participation. That somehow as the disciples passed out food, it continued growing in their hands too. Others argue the crowd itself joined in, those with hidden bread inspired by the boy began to share. A communal ripple of generosity. Still others hold firm, no, this was supernatural, a divine override, creation in real time. But all agree on one thing, it fed everyone, thousands, and there were leftovers. 12 baskets full. That's not random. 12, one for each disciple. 1 basket for each set of skeptical hands, as if Jesus is saying, you didn't believe we had enough. Here, take your reminder home. And here's a beautiful curiosity, the bread wasn't wheat, it was barley. The food of the poor, the humble, and the fish. Probably salted sardines, the kind you could carry in a pouch for lunch, not serve at a banquet. Jesus doesn't work with luxury, he works with what's available. Because God doesn't need gold to perform glory. He just needs willingness. There's a moment in this story easily skipped that says Jesus had compassion on them. because they were like sheep without a shepherd. That word compassion isn't just pity. In the Greek, it means gut-level mercy, a stirring so deep it moves your insides. That's why he fed them, not to impress, to care. To say, you matter enough for bread, you matter enough for fish, you matter enough for me. And after the miracle, he slips away, doesn't bask in applause, doesn't organize a fundraiser. He walks up the mountain, alone, to pray. Because this wasn't about fame, it was about nourishment, quiet, wholly sufficient. So now you sit again on that grassy slope. The stars begin to prick the sky. Your belly is full. But more than that, your soul is full. And as the breeze brushes your face, you look down at your own hands. Empty, maybe. Or maybe full of something you just haven't offered yet. The stars are overhead now, scattered across the night like the breadcrumbs of angels. The crowd has gone home, bellies full, hearts stretched wide. But Jesus has moved on. The wind carries his name across the hills, soft like a lullaby. You follow the trail of stories and footprints to the next quiet wonder, one that feels almost clumsy at first. It involves mud, saliva, and a man who's never seen light. He was born blind. You find him sitting near the temple steps, palms up, face lifted toward a sun he's never glimpsed. People pass him without pause. Some drop coins. Others whisper blame. Who sinned, they ask. This man or his parents? It's not a medical question. It's a moral one. Back then, illness was assumed to be punishment. Blindness wasn't just a physical state, it was a spiritual indictment. Jesus hears the question, stops, kneels beside the man. Neither, he says, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And just like that, the story pivots, not from guilt, but toward glory. But what happens next is strange. Jesus spits, right there in the dust. Then he kneels and mixes his spit with dirt, forms a paste, gently presses it onto the man's eyes, smears it with care. There's no ritual, no incantation, just divine DNA mingled with earth. He tells the man, go wash in the pool of Siloam. That's it. And now the walk begins. You follow him as he feels his way through alleyways and courtyards, led perhaps by a friend or guided by memory. The pool glistens ahead, fed by a tunnel Hezekiah carved centuries earlier. The name Siloam means sent, and it lives up to it now. The man kneels, cups water, washes, and then the world floods in. Light, color, movement, faces. The man gasps, maybe screams, maybe weeps. For the first time in his life, he sees. And what does he see first? Not Jesus. Jesus has already moved on. That's important. Because the miracle wasn't in the moment of presence, but in the obedience that followed absence. You take that into yourself now. Sometimes God speaks, then disappears, leaves you with mud on your face and a command. The healing comes when you walk anyway. Some theologians note the oddity of the method. Why use spit? Why not a word? There are layers here. In Jewish tradition, saliva was sometimes believed to carry healing properties. But more than that, it's deeply human. Jesus didn't just use divine power, he used his body, his breath, his earth. A subtle reminder that God heals through embodiment, through the tangible, the lowly, the ordinary. In the mud, it echoes Genesis. Dust and breath formed the first man. Now again, dust and divine breath recreate a broken part. Others argue the process was designed to delay healing intentionally. Not instant, not flashy, but messy, inconvenient, requiring trust and effort. And here's a soft theological uncertainty. Why not just heal him immediately? Some believe the act of walking, of seeking the pool, was necessary not for Jesus, but for the man, to shape his faith through action, to make him part of the miracle. You feel that now, how often healing doesn't come in one breath, but in muddy, confused forward steps toward a pool you can't see yet. When the man returns, seeing everything explodes. The neighbors argue, is this really him? He nods, I am the man. They drag him to the Pharisees. They investigate, interrogate, press him for details. He tells the truth. He put mud on my eyes. I washed. And now I see. They don't like it. They say Jesus broke Sabbath rules, that he must be a sinner. But the man says something that still rings through time like a bell in a canyon. One thing I do know, I was blind. Now I see. It's not theology, it's testimony. And it stands unshaken. Eventually they throw him out of the synagogue. Excommunicated, canceled. But Jesus hears, and he comes back, finds him, and for the first time the man sees the face of the one who healed him. Jesus asks, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man says, who is he, sir, that I may believe? Jesus says, you have now seen him. Seen, not heard, seen. He believes, worships. You sit with him now there on the dusty steps as the sun tilts low again and shadows stretch long. He's no longer a beggar, no longer a mystery. He is seen inside and out. And you remember this? Some miracles happen in stages. Some require spit and dirt and confusion. And some ask you to walk blind until the light floods in. But they all begin the same way, with a whisper from the one who still makes mud with mercy. You're walking now into a place the disciples weren't sure they wanted to go. The wind smells different here, darker somehow, like smoke clinging to distant cliffs. The land is steep, rugged, foreign. You feel it in your spine. This is not home soil. They call it the region of the Gerasenes, Gentile territory, pig country, unclean by every religious metric the disciples know. And yet, Jesus steps ashore without hesitation. You follow him as he climbs from the boat. The sand gives way to grass, then stone, and then a scream cuts the morning open. You turn. A man is running toward you barefoot, filthy, clothed in rags, barely worthy of the word. His hair is matted, his face sunburned and cracked like old earth. He lives among tombs, lives there, in a graveyard, where the dead lie and the living don't visit. He's violent, uncontrollable. The locals tried chains, ropes, stones, nothing worked. And he's possessed. Not by one demon, by many. When he falls before Jesus, his voice comes in echoes like a cave shouting back at itself. What have you to do with me? Jesus, Son of the Most High God, I beg you don't torment me. Jesus asks simply, what is your name? The answer comes from somewhere deep and tangled. Legion, for we are many. And there's something in those 3 words that wraps around your ribs. We are many. That's how it can feel sometimes, isn't it? Like the torment doesn't come in singles, but in swarms. Anxieties stacked on doubts. Memories wrapped in shame. Echoes that won't be quiet. Legion was more than a name, it was a condition, a confession, a chaos. And now, they beg. The demons beg Jesus not to send them into the abyss, not into silence. Instead, they plead, let us enter the pigs. There's a herd nearby, large, probably the economic backbone of someone's estate. Jesus says, yes. That's the part that always surprises people. He allows it. And then chaos. The pigs rush down the slope, snorting, squealing, and plunge into the water. Gone. Silence follows. The man lies there, breathing, eyes wide, unburdened. The people come running. They'd heard the commotion. And what they find? A man seated, clothed, in his right mind. And they're terrified. Not amazed, afraid. Because fear doesn't always come from darkness. Sometimes it rises when light rearranges your understanding. They beg Jesus to leave. Not the man, not the pigs, Jesus. And again he says yes. But the man, the one who was once Legion, runs after him. Let me come with you. But Jesus says no. Go home. Tell how much God has done for you. So he does. Becomes the first missionary to the Gentiles, not trained, not fluent in scripture, just healed. That's how ministry starts sometimes, with the man no one expected to survive. There's a theological wrinkle here that scholars love to tug at. Why did Jesus grant the demons' request? Some say it was to reveal their true nature, to show the community what had truly been living among them. Others suggest it was to give the man full closure. The evil didn't just leave it destroyed itself. And others more cautiously say this moment reminds us God's mercy even touches the damned. That Jesus, when faced with Legion, responded not with fire, but with permission. A strange mercy. And here's something quieter. This is one of the only miracles where Jesus doesn't just cast something out, he converses with it. There's dialogue, space, naming. Because sometimes the thing tormenting you must first be identified before it can be driven out. You think about that now, watching the man breathe in the morning for the first time in years. His hands tremble, not from terror, but from relief. His eyes look human again. And you understand something deeply, almost without words. Jesus traveled across a storm-tossed sea into forbidden territory just to rescue one man. Because heaven doesn't measure value by crowd size. It sees the individual in the graveyard, the one who's howling in the dark, the one who feels too far gone. And even you are worth crossing storms for. So now you sit on the edge of that hill, staring at the calm sea that moments ago held screaming pigs and shattered chains. You see the man walking away toward the village that once feared him. And maybe you wonder what it felt like the first time someone touched him without recoiling. The first time someone said, "Welcome back," or the first time he slept through a night in silence. You'll never forget this place. Because not all miracles happen in temples. Some unfold among tombs. The tombs are behind you now, but they cling to your thoughts like early morning fog. You walk the road back toward the city where stone and scripture mix in the air and voices echo between courtyards. It's warmer here, Dusty sunbeams catch in the folds of worn tunics, and the hush of tension hovers like a veil. A woman has been caught, dragged from shadows and silence into a crowd she never asked to stand before. You hear the words first, sharp, legal, cold. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commands us to stone her. What do you say? It's a trap, of course. They don't care about her. They care about him. About catching Jesus between law and mercy, between Torah and tenderness. And you watch the woman. She doesn't cry, doesn't speak, just stands there, barefoot, dust on her ankles, hair falling like a curtain over her shame. The crowd leans in, ready for spectacle, rocks already in hands. And Jesus, he doesn't speak. He kneels. Fingers move over the earth, drawing, writing, tracing something in the dust. No one knows what he writes. That's one of the oldest mysteries in Scripture. Some say it was a list of sins. Others think it was names. Some suggest he wrote out the very commandment they quoted, reminding them of their own cracks. But the silence is thunderous. Then he speaks low even. Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. No shouts, no fire from heaven, just one sentence, and more silence. One by one they begin to leave. Oldest first. Isn't that interesting? The elders drop their stones before the young, as if age has taught them the weight of their own shadows. The woman stands still, heart loud in her chest. Finally, only Jesus remains, and he straightens, looks at her, not through her, not around her, at her. Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She whispers, no one, sir. Then neither do I. Go now and leave your life of sin. And just like that, mercy has rewritten judgment. But don't miss this, Jesus doesn't deny the sin. He doesn't pretend it didn't happen. He simply refuses to weaponize it. That's the miracle here, not the avoidance of law, but the collision of justice and compassion, where sin is acknowledged, but the person isn't discarded. And something delicate lives in that moment, a second chance that feels as tangible as wind on your face. Some theologians argue this passage wasn't originally in the earliest manuscripts of John. It floats like an orphaned story, beloved but mysterious. Yet it remains because it carries something true. Something that feels more like Jesus than almost anything else. A savior who kneels with sinners, who writes in dust instead of on stone tablets. There's a theological whisper here. Jesus, the very author of the law, bends down, not to enforce it, but to remind them why it existed in the first place. Not for death, but for life. And here's something rarely noticed: the woman never asked for forgiveness. She didn't have time. She was caught, dragged, exposed. And still grace found her. It moved ahead of confession. Not in place of it, but ahead of it. Like morning light creeping into a dark room before you even open the curtains. That's what grace does. And now you walk beside her down a back alley where no one dares follow. Her pace is slow, like someone learning to walk again. You don't know what her story becomes. Scripture doesn't say, but you imagine it often. Does she return to her family? Does she sit by a window every evening, remembering the sound of stones falling? Does she whisper his words before sleep, neither do I condemn you? There's a softness in her now, not weakness, but softness forged by being seen and not punished. That changes a person. You feel it inside yourself too, that secret you carry, that guilt, that moment you think disqualifies you. And now you know he wrote in dust for you too, because stones don't build holy things, but forgiveness does. And the next time someone tries to accuse you with your past, you remember this moment where shame stood in the square and walked away free. The square fades behind you, swept clean of its judgment and echoing footsteps. Now the air feels still heavier somehow. Trees line the road ahead, their leaves curling slightly inward like they're listening. You're walking with Jesus again, but he says little. Just watches the world with those eyes that see past time, past intention, straight into the marrow of a moment. Then he stops. You follow his gaze. It lands on a fig tree, lush in leaves green and full, the kind that promises sweetness. But there's no fruit. None. Not one fig. It's not the season for fruit, you might say. But Jesus isn't here for agriculture, he's here for truth. He approaches it like a teacher eyeing a dishonest scroll. Looks it over, lifts a hand, and he speaks. May no one ever eat fruit from you again. The words are quiet. There's no thunder, no shaking earth, just silence. The disciples glance at each other, confused, maybe even embarrassed. It's just a tree, right? But the next day as they pass it again, the tree is withered. From the roots, shriveled, dead. And suddenly this quiet act, almost petty on the surface, becomes a parable etched in bark. This is no tantrum, it's a teaching. The fig tree looked alive. It had leaves, it had form. It promised fruit, but it was empty. All show, no sustenance. And Jesus, who heals the broken, embraces the rejected, feeds the hungry, judges. Yes, because pretense has no place in the kingdom. It's a moment that slices. He's not cursing nature, he's cursing appearance without essence. Some scholars tie this directly to Jerusalem, to the temple system flourishing with ritual and pageantry but hollow beneath, a religion blooming with leaves and void of love. Others see it more personally, a call to soul examination. Are you leafy with spiritual language but barren of compassion? Do you look fruitful while hiding your famine? This miracle is quiet but confrontational. It's not one that comforts the broken, it challenges the comfortable. And here's a lesser-known: wrinkle figs actually develop before the full leaf bloom. So in a tree full of leaves, fruit should have already been present. It wasn't just unripe, it was deceiving. You feel that now, how dangerous it is to decorate your life with signs of health while starving inside. Jesus doesn't destroy what's unready, he destroys what pretends. That's the difference. There's a strange peace in this realization, a hidden gentleness, because he never curses the bruised, never scorches the struggling, but the fake, the performance that he uproots without apology. You walk a little slower now, looking at yourself, your habits, your hidden places. And maybe you wonder, if Jesus walked past you this morning, would he find fruit or just leaves? It's not condemnation, it's invitation. Because while this tree withers, you still breathe. You still can bear fruit, but it won't come through performance. It will come through presence, through intimacy, through roots that drink living water instead of applause. Another layer peels back in your thoughts. The withering tree becomes a symbol later for Israel's judgment, an echo of prophetic images from Hosea and Jeremiah. But even deeper, it speaks to urgency. The time for fruit is now. The kingdom is near. And Jesus, so full of grace, will not allow rot to masquerade as righteousness. You think back to the woman caught in adultery. No leaves, just broken branches. But she was spared. This tree lush and lifeless, and it was judged. The difference is honesty. She brought her sin to the light. The tree hid its lack in beauty. And so now, under a different fig tree, perhaps you sit and let the breeze comb through your hair. You imagine roots running down from your heart, not for show, not for religion, but for life. You don't want to wither in disguise. You want to be real, raw, growing, even if your fruit is small, even if it takes time, because he is walking still, looking not for leaves, but for something sweet. The fig tree vanishes behind you, a parable carved into silence. The road ahead tilts slightly upward, dust curling at your heels. The air smells like sun-warmed stone and distant salt, and now you're back near the sea again. You hear the hush of water, the slap of boat ropes against wooden posts, but it's not the sea that holds your attention, it's Peter. He's in the boat, again. You know this place. It's night now, moonlight pooling on the waves like spilled oil. The boat rocks gently, but unease flickers in the disciples' voices. The wind has picked up, the water has begun to stir. Jesus isn't with them. Not this time. He stayed behind to pray on the mountain, alone. So they row, tired, quiet, eyes scanning the horizon for no real reason except the haunting memory of the last storm. Then someone sees it. A figure, on the water, walking. They panic, of course, think it's a ghost. Their fear is loud, the boat lurches. But the figure raises a hand, and a voice so familiar, so calm, rides the wind. Take heart, it is I. Don't be afraid. That voice, you know it. So does Peter. And what he says next is bold, almost absurd. Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water. Jesus doesn't say, Peter, that's dangerous. He doesn't say, wait until the waves settle. He simply says one word, come. And Peter steps out of the boat, onto water, and it holds. He walks. You hold your breath. No tricks. No hidden platforms. Just faith meeting miracle in real time. A human being walking on liquid because Jesus said, come. But then Peter looks around. The wind, the waves, the impossible under his feet. And he doubts. And he sinks. The water pulls at his ankles, then his knees, then his chest. His arms flail, and his voice rises like a flare. Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reaches out and catches him. There's no delay, no hesitation, just rescue. And then comes the gentle question, more a sigh than a scold. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? They climb into the boat together. The wind hushes, the sea calms. Again. But this time it's different. Because someone walked, someone tried, and that changes everything. You see, this miracle isn't just about Jesus walking on water. It's about Peter failing faithfully. It's about a disciple who dared to believe that if Jesus was out there, the water between them wasn't a barrier, it was a bridge. And when he faltered, Jesus didn't rebuke the attempt. He honored it. There's a gentle joke here hidden in the foam. Peter was safer sinking toward Jesus than sitting dry in the boat without him. Think about that. Better to be drowning in pursuit of Christ than lounging in fear untouched but unchanged. Some scholars highlight the word come. It echoes the same command Jesus used elsewhere to the weary, to the burdened, to the dead. Come. Always the invitation, always the risk, always the reward. Others debate whether Peter failed. Some say yes, he doubted. Others say no, he stepped out while the rest stayed behind. Maybe both are true. Because faith isn't always flawless. It wavers, it second guesses, but it steps, it moves. And God honors movement. There's another layer. Water in ancient Hebrew thought often symbolized chaos. The deep, the unknown, the abyss. And here's Jesus walking over it like a king over his domain. Sovereign over storms, walking where no feet should tread. And Peter, he joins him. For a moment, yes, but long enough to prove the point. You don't need calm seas to meet God. You just need to answer the invitation. You sit now near the boat's edge. Your hand trails in the now smooth water. The moon reflects like a silver coin. You think of all the times you hesitated, stayed seated when Jesus said, come. But tonight you hear it again. Not loud, not forced, just whispered into the rhythm of the waves. Come. And you know, even if you sink, he'll still catch you. Morning light breaks across olive groves and temple stones, soft gold brushing rooftops, as if heaven is gently waking the city. You walk a step behind Jesus now, a little slower, feeling the weight of memory, the water under your feet, the hand that pulled you up. But there's no time to linger. The next miracle happens fast. They come with swords and torches. Not a crowd, not a mob, but a detachment. Roman soldiers, temple guards, armed, organized, cold. You're in Gethsemane, the garden that still smells of crushed olives and midnight sweat. Jesus has just finished praying, and his face, though calm, is marked by resolve, by something eternal. You see Judas appear from the trees. You know what he's about to do. He kisses Jesus, and with that kiss, the world shifts. The guards move in, hands grab, chains clink, tension crackles. But then it happens in a flash. Peter steps forward, sword drawn. You didn't know he had one. And before anyone can stop him, he swings. A cry, a clash, and then silence. A man stumbles back, hand to the side of his head. He's a servant, Malchus, his ear gone. Blood drips onto olive roots. The soldiers freeze, everyone stares. Then Jesus moves. No shout, no curse, just steps forward calm as morning fog. He reaches out, touches the side of Malchus's head. And just like that, the ear is restored. No chant, no command, just contact. A healing tucked into the middle of betrayal. That's the miracle. A moment of restoration inside a scene of destruction. Some scholars suggest Jesus performed this healing not for Malchus, but for Peter, to show him this is not the way. Others argue it was Jesus' final miracle before the cross, and he used it to protect his disciples. By healing the servant, he de-escalated the moment, removed the evidence, stopped blood from becoming a charge. But more beautifully still, Malchus is named. That's rare for someone minor in the story. It means people remembered him. Maybe he followed Jesus after this. Maybe the touch lingered in his memory long after the guards dragged Jesus away. The theological mystery here is subtle. Jesus, facing betrayal, arrest, trial, pauses to heal an enemy. He doesn't flee. He doesn't fight. He restores. And there's a soft irony in that. Peter, who had just said he'd die for Jesus, is the one swinging wildly, trying to stop what can't be stopped. Jesus, who knows he's going to die, is the one healing. You feel the lesson rise in your chest. The way of Christ is not always defense. Sometimes it's mercy in the face of madness. The crowd grabs Jesus. The moment spins forward, but Malchus stands still, touching his ear, probably trembling, because pain became peace in one breath. And you think, now how many times has Jesus touched something in your life that someone else tried to cut away? How many wounds has he healed quietly in moments no one else even noticed? There's something personal in this miracle. It isn't public like feeding thousands. It isn't dramatic like calming a sea. It's specific, targeted, tender. A healing for a man with no prayer on his lips, no faith declaration, no confession, just pain. And Jesus met it, right there, right then. Because mercy doesn't need to be asked, it just is. You walk now through the trees, slow the scent of oil and soil wrapping around you. You imagine Malchus later tracing his hand over his healed ear, wondering why the man he came to arrest was more human than any of them. And maybe you remember too, God still reaches out in moments of betrayal, still heals what others try to destroy, still touches enemies, still calls you to put the sword away, because the gospel isn't spread by force. It spreads through wounds, especially the ones he chooses to heal before the cross. You wake to the sound of feet, dozens of them shuffling across packed earth and dry grass. The sky is pale, still deciding what kind of day it wants to be. Jesus walks ahead again, this time with a strange calm. You feel a kind of déjà vu, not because of repetition, but contrast. Another crowd, another hunger. But this isn't the miracle of 5,000. It's the other one? The one fewer people talk about. 4,000 men this time, plus women and children, each face drawn thin by days without food. They've been following Jesus through the wilderness for 3 days. No tents, no reserves, just faith. Dusty, blistered, worn-out faith. And he sees them. He doesn't say they'll be fine. He doesn't send them away. Instead, he turns to the disciples and says what he always says, before something quiet and miraculous. I have compassion for these people. It's not the same word as pity. This compassion stirs from deep inside. It means he feels them, feels their weakness in his ribs, feels their weariness in his knees. You look around, there's nothing, except again a little. This time 7 loaves, a few small fish. Not 5 loaves, not 2 fish, 7. A number that in scripture hums with completeness. Jesus takes them, blesses them, breaks them, hands them out. Sound familiar? It should, but this isn't a rerun, it's a reminder. Because miracles aren't just one-time events. Sometimes God repeats himself to say, yes, I'll do it again. Some scholars puzzle over why this second feeding is even here. Was it the same story told differently, a scribal duplicate? But no, the details differ. The numbers, the location, the baskets. 7 baskets of leftovers this time. And the word for basket here isn't the same as before. In the first feeding, they were small, hand-sized baskets, kophinos. Here the Greek word is spouros, large baskets. The kind Paul was lowered from a wall in, so 7 huge baskets remain. It's more than a replay, it's an escalation. Because this miracle doesn't happen near Jewish villages, it happens in Gentile territory. That's the detail most miss. This feeding isn't just physical provision, it's a theological announcement. That Jesus isn't just bread for the chosen people, he's bread for everyone. Even the ones on the margins, the ones outside the covenant, and he feeds them the same way. No less care, no lesser blessing. Just as much compassion. You look at the disciples, they seem slower this time, more cautious, as if they've seen this before but still aren't quite sure if it can happen again. Isn't that us? We witness grace once and then wonder if we're allowed to expect it twice. But Jesus doesn't need reminding. He sees hunger and he feeds. There's a quiet humor here too. Imagine the disciples collecting leftovers again, shaking their heads. How did we forget again? Because God's provision always feels surprising even when it's repeated. Especially when it's repeated. And maybe that's the miracle inside the miracle. Not just that he fed the crowd, but that he fed them again. Because repetition doesn't weaken wonder, it deepens it. You sit now near one of the baskets, bread still warm inside. A child tugs on her mother's sleeve, smiling through crumbs. A father hands fish to a stranger. And Jesus watches not proudly, but peacefully. This isn't about multiplication anymore. It's about message. You're not forgotten. You're not outside the promise. Even if you think you don't belong, he still counts you in. Still sees your need. Still invites you to sit down not as a visitor, but as family. The sun is higher now, brushing light through olive branches and warming the backs of those who walk with purpose, but no fame. The crowd from the hillside meal has begun to scatter their hunger, satisfied their stories, already stretching into rumor. But you're walking beside Jesus again, this time through the narrow press of a village road. And the air shifts. There's tension, not loud, not violent, subtle but unmistakable, like a string pulled too tight. He's moving quietly. No teaching right now. No miracles, at least none expected. Just the sound of sandals on dirt. And then the woman appears. She doesn't shout. She doesn't even speak. She reaches. You don't see her at first. She's low in the crowd. Quick. Her hand moves through a forest of elbows and cloaks until she touches the hem of his garment. But this isn't the bleeding woman you met before. This is something stranger. 'Cause Jesus stops again? Not just stops, spins. Who touched me, he asks. The disciples blink, the crowd blurs. But he knows. Someone touched not just fabric, but faith. And here's the curious part. It's not clear if he was talking to anyone new or back to that same woman. Because according to some early traditions, apocryphal though they may be, she didn't just disappear after her healing. She followed, quietly, gratefully, humbly, touching his cloak again. Not to be healed, but to stay near the one who made her whole. One legend even names her Veronica. Not in scripture, not canon, but whispered across centuries in dusty cathedrals and hidden liturgies. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one. Because his garment meant more than fabric. It was tzitzit prayer fringe. God's commands woven into his robe. People reached not for skin, but for promise. There's an ancient Jewish teaching that says, "The Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings." Some scholars point out that wings can also mean the corners of garments. So when someone touched the edge of Jesus' robe, they were reaching for prophecy, for the edge of God's plan. And the garment, it didn't just hang on him. It knew him. It carried the scent of miracles, the weight of compassion, like it held stories in its threads. And here's the deeper miracle hiding in plain sight, the garment responded. Not in a magical way, but in a deeply spiritual one. Because the moment it was touched with faith, something activated. Jesus says, "Power went out from me." He felt it. The garment symbolic of law became a conduit for grace. This wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about reframing everything people thought they knew about access to God. In the old ways, you brought offerings to the temple. You waited outside holy places. Now, you reach out through a crowd and the kingdom comes to you. There's something quietly comic here too. The disciples again try to brush it off. Everyone's touching you, but Jesus isn't looking for contact. He's looking for connection. And you've touched him too, haven't you? In your worst moments, or in your small prayers whispered while washing dishes or staring at ceilings in the dark. You didn't grab his hand. You just brushed the fringe. And it was enough. Because for Jesus, it's never about how loudly you ask. It's about how earnestly you reach. And maybe that's why he keeps pausing, keeps noticing, keeps turning around in crowds full of need just to make sure the silent ones know, "I felt you." You sit now by a fig tree, shadows dappling the dirt. The road continues ahead, but for a moment the breeze tugs at your thoughts like a thread on the edge of a garment. You wonder, what have you been reaching for lately? Approval, peace, escape. What would happen if you reached for him instead? Just the fringe. No handshake. No spotlight. Just a silent, trembling brush against the promise that maybe, just maybe, grace still moves through cloth. And maybe, just maybe, he still stops. The road begins to slope again, descending into quiet plains dotted with olive groves and wildflowers curling in the breeze. You're not in a synagogue. You're not in the city. Just open sky and whispers in the grass. Ahead you see a man. He doesn't walk with a limp or cry out for help. He wears no rags. His posture is proud. His clothing is simple but sharp. He is a Roman, a centurion. This is someone used to control, to power. One word from him and soldiers march. One gesture and citizens scatter. But today he doesn't come with orders. He comes with humility and a strange kind of faith. "Lord," he says, bowing his head as Jesus approaches, "my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus replies without hesitation, "I will go and heal him." And now comes the miracle. Not the healing itself, at least not yet, but the faith. The centurion says something few ever dared to say. "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. Just say the word." He goes on, "For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." Jesus stops. He smiles. He marvels. That's rare. In fact, Scripture only records him marveling twice, once at unbelief and once here at great faith. "I tell you the truth," Jesus says, turning to the crowd, "I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." Let that settle into your spirit. A Roman, a Gentile, an outsider. And Jesus celebrates his belief. The healing, it happens off stage. No journey, no touch, no ceremony. Jesus simply says, "Let it be done just as you believed it would." And miles away at that very moment, the servant is healed. The centurion will return home and find his friend upright, whole, stunned. But the real miracle, it already happened right here when someone outside the chosen people trusted Jesus more than those closest to him. There's a deeper beauty here. The centurion understood authority. He saw it clearly. He saw that Jesus didn't need to show up to be powerful. That distance means nothing to divinity. Some theologians believe this moment foreshadows the global reach of the gospel, that faith would blossom not just in Jerusalem, but in Rome and Asia, in far-off corners where Hebrew was never spoken. Others see it as a rebuke, a reminder that proximity doesn't guarantee belief. But most agree this is one of the purest expressions of faith in all the Gospels. And here's a curiosity: the centurion likely didn't even grow up with the scriptures. No synagogue classes, no messianic prophecies, no ancestral lineage tied to Abraham. Just an encounter. And an intuition: this man speaks, and the universe listens. You take that now and hold it close. Because maybe you felt too far. Maybe you think you're outside the right tribe, the right background, the right vocabulary. But Jesus doesn't need you to belong first. He just needs you to believe. And even that doesn't have to be loud. This man didn't raise his voice, didn't bring the servant with him, didn't beg. He trusted. You picture him now standing tall, armor glinting in the sun, but his spirit bowed in awe. A man who commands men but knows when to kneel before God. And Jesus honored that. He loved that. He still does. Because faith isn't measured by your rituals. It's measured by your response. And today someone responded not with religion, but with respect. The city buzz fades again as you walk past homes built from dusty stone and timber, the kind of place where chickens dart across alleys, and the air carries the smell of baked barley and olive oil. It's a small town, unimportant by most standards. But today, the crowd is slowly swelling. It starts with a boy, just a boy. You wouldn't have noticed him, except he's standing a little apart, watching the disciples argue about the size of the crowd and the size of the problem. Again, thousands of people, no food. The rhythm of scarcity rises once more. Philip says it would take half a year's wages to feed all these people. You've heard this before, but there's something new this time. Andrew speaks up, not with a solution, but with something awkwardly small. There's a boy here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many? And the boy, he says nothing, just offers it. Tiny, inadequate, laughable even. A lunchbox? You picture his hands, maybe dirty, maybe sticky with date syrup. His eyes looking up, not really knowing what will happen, but offering it anyway. And Jesus, he smiles, takes the bread, gives thanks, and again breaks it. That's the miracle pattern, isn't it? Take, bless, break, give. He does it with your heart too. But this moment isn't just about feeding a crowd. It's about something more delicate. The boy, he's never named. He disappears after this. But for a brief moment, heaven moved through his generosity. Not through power, not through position, through surrender. And the meal, it fed thousands. Not because it was enough, but because it was offered. You sit now beside that boy in your mind. You don't need to ask if he regrets handing it over. His eyes sparkle. His face is flushed with wonder. He didn't feed the crowd, but his faith made room for the miracle. There's a hidden detail here. Barley loaves were the bread of the poor, cheaper, rougher, unrefined. God didn't need gourmet. He used what was available. Some theologians point out the quiet power in that divine abundance doesn't need luxury, it just needs trust. Others observe that this miracle is the only one recorded in all 4 Gospels. That's no accident. It tells you something central to the kingdom. God multiplies what you release. And that child, he didn't wait for permission. He didn't check the crowd size. He just looked at Jesus and said, without saying anything, "Here, take what I have." Imagine that moment again. Thousands of adults paralyzed by the math of the impossible. And a child just hands over lunch. Sometimes the greatest faith isn't loud. It isn't scholarly. It's small, innocent, brave in its own simple way. There's a soft joke buried here too. Jesus takes the lunch, multiplies it, and somehow everyone eats as much as they wanted. This wasn't rationing. This wasn't careful measuring. This was divine generosity. And when it's over, 12 baskets left over. You smile now, remembering why. One for each disciple again. The doubters, the calculators, the ones who said it's not enough. Jesus hands them reminders, not of their failure, but of his faithfulness. You watch the boy again, now fading back into the crowd, probably munching on a piece of his own bread made holy by the hands of God. He won't make it into sermons, won't be remembered by name, but he was the hinge of the moment, the one who said yes when everyone else said it's too little. And maybe that's you. You think your gift is too small, your story too quiet, your time too late. But Jesus isn't asking for enough. He's asking for willing. You let that truth soften something in your chest. Maybe you've been holding your own lunchbox too tightly, afraid it's laughable, unseen. But heaven sees it. And Jesus still takes what looks like too little and makes it overflow. The air smells like dust and dry grass again, but the mood has shifted. You're walking behind Jesus, and the crowd today isn't quiet. It hums with energy, alive with something more than awe urgency. People surge forward like waves. Every miracle adds new believers. Every whisper adds weight to his name. And then you see him, a leper, not hiding, running. That's the first surprise. Lepers don't approach crowds. They don't run toward anyone, especially not someone like Jesus. They live in the shadows, outside the city, cursed, feared, untouchable. But this one, he breaks every rule. You hear the gasps as he runs forward, face barely covered, voice rising, not with desperation, but with boldness. Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus stops. No one speaks. You can feel people holding their breath, inching backward. Some turn their faces. You know why. Because in that culture, leprosy isn't just disease, it's social death. Rabbis taught that even standing near a leper defiled you. But Jesus, he steps forward and stretches out his hand. Touches him. Before the healing, before the words. His fingers press against infected skin like mercy given shape. And then he says, I am willing, be clean. Immediately the disease vanishes. The man stands there blinking, body whole. Not just healed, restored, and the touch, it echoes louder than the miracle. Jesus could have healed him with a word, but he chose touch. Because sometimes what you need most isn't fixing, it's being seen. And here's the twist. Jesus then says something surprising, don't tell anyone. A direct instruction. Go show yourself to the priest. Offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony. But the man doesn't listen. He tells everyone. And because of that, Jesus can no longer enter towns openly. The crowds swell too large. He stays outside in lonely places. You wonder why the secrecy? Some scholars suggest this was part of what they call the messianic secret. Jesus wanted to delay public hysteria, to fulfill prophecy without premature interference. Others say it was about focus. He didn't want the miracles to become the message. He didn't come just to wow, he came to redeem. But the man, he couldn't help it. When you've been exiled from life and suddenly feel skin again, warm and real, how do you keep that quiet? There's something here about disobedient gratitude. Not recommended, but understandable. You think now about how Jesus touched him before saying a word, and you wonder how long it had been since that man felt anything human. Years, maybe. Jesus didn't just cure his disease. He crushed his isolation. You sit now by a dry well. The breeze hums in the grass. You stare at your own hands and remember all the times you pulled them away from people, ashamed of something invisible but loud. And now, you remember the one who still reaches toward the parts of you others run from. He doesn't recoil. He reaches, even when it's messy, even when it's dangerous, even when it's illegal. He touches what's unclean and makes it sacred. And here's a spiritual curiosity you may not have heard. Some ancient rabbis believed that when the Messiah came, he would heal leprosy, something seen as incurable by man. So when Jesus does this, he's not just helping someone, he's declaring himself. Not with trumpet blasts, but with open hands. You picture the man walking back to the priest now, whole, head held higher, offering the sacrifices required by law, but knowing deep inside that grace met him first. And you remember, when the world says stay away, Jesus says come closer. When your wounds say I am unworthy, he says I am willing. And when shame whispers don't speak, he leans in and answers with a touch. The hills roll quiet behind you now, and the dust rises with every step. There's a crowd again, but not the kind that shouts. This one waits. A hushed expectancy spreads across the synagogue like a held breath. It's the Sabbath. The scrolls have been read. The floor is swept clean. But not all eyes are on the teacher. Some are watching the man. He's easy to spot. One arm hangs close to his side, withered, unmoving. A birth injury, maybe, or something that stole strength with time. And others? They're watching Jesus, waiting to catch him. Not with a miracle, but a misstep. They know his pattern. He does things on the Sabbath, things that make tradition itch. So they gather not to worship, but to accuse. Jesus knows. And that's when he calls the man forward. Come here. The man looks startled, like a deer caught in too much attention. But he steps forward anyway. You feel it now, something divine in the tension. Holiness and hostility colliding in a room that should have been safe. Then Jesus asks the room, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? Silence. No one speaks. Because the answer is obvious, but their hearts are not. Jesus looks around at them. Anger flickers in his eyes, but so does grief. And then he turns back to the man. Stretch out your hand. That's it. No oil, no touch, no dramatic chant. Just obedience. The man lifts his arm. It straightens. The fingers flex. Strength returns? A hush falls over the room like a curtain pulled tight. He was healed not by being touched, but by being told to act. And here's what no one tells you: that might have been the hardest part of all. To move what has never moved before. To try what's always failed. He could have said, "I can't." He could have hesitated. But he didn't. He stretched. And the miracle happened in the motion. Some scholars note that this healing challenged more than disease. It challenged fear. Jesus called a disabled man to the center of religious power and asked him to act in front of everyone. That takes more than faith. That takes courage. There's a theological thread here too. In Jewish law, healing on the Sabbath wasn't technically forbidden, but many leaders added layers of interpretation over time. Mercy got buried beneath rule books. And Jesus, he ripped the pages open, not to reject the law, but to restore its heart. Another soft irony: these leaders would have rescued a sheep from a pit on the Sabbath. But they didn't want a man's dignity restored. They feared the wrong thing. But not the man. He obeyed, and his obedience made room for the miracle. There's a moment here you carry with you. Jesus didn't say, "Be healed." He said, "Stretch out your hand." Sometimes the command sounds like the impossible, and yet it's the pathway to healing. You think about your own withered places, areas of shame, parts of yourself you've kept hidden, maybe for years. You've said, "That doesn't work anymore." And Jesus whispers, "Stretch it out." It doesn't have to be strong yet. It doesn't have to be whole first. Just offer it. And the strength, it meets you in motion. Another quiet insight: the man didn't ask to be healed. Jesus noticed him and called him forward. That's grace. It sees the ignored. It invites the hidden. And it doesn't say, "Do more." It says, "Try again." You stand now outside that synagogue sunlight, warming your shoulders, the memory of that room still fresh in your chest. The man walks past you, flexing his fingers like someone learning a new language. The disciples smile, but the teachers? They're already plotting, because love threatens control. And mercy moves things they want to keep still. But Jesus, he never avoids the conflict. He just keeps calling the withered things into motion. And maybe that's what he's doing in you. The synagogue is behind you now, but the tension lingers in the back of your ribs like the ghost of an argument. The path ahead is quieter hills, rising gently, birdsong in the trees, a wind that smells like grain and distance. You walk behind Jesus again, and this time the crowd is thin. No miracles today, not yet. Just a gate and a funeral. You don't realize it's a funeral at first. You just see the cluster of mourners pressing out of the city gates of Nain. You hear the weeping before you see the coffin. The sounds aren't dramatic, they're raw, low, heavy. A mother walks at the front. She's bent not from age but from loss. A widow, and now her only son is gone. She walks behind the wooden bier with dust in her hair and grief in her bones. There is no husband at her side, no other children. This boy was her last family, her last protector, her last future. And now, he's still wrapped in cloth, carried by men with lowered eyes. Jesus sees her. That's where the miracle begins. Not with power, with seeing. He doesn't wait for a prayer. She doesn't ask him for anything. She probably doesn't even know who he is. But he sees her, and he feels. Luke writes, his heart went out to her. That phrase, in Greek, it means his gut twisted. Compassion wasn't a thought. It was a bodily reaction. And he says to her so gently, "Don't cry." You might expect him to comfort her, maybe pray, maybe bless the dead. But what he does next rewrites the air. He steps forward and touches the coffin. Everyone gasps, because that is forbidden. In that time, touching a corpse or even a vessel that held one made you ceremonially unclean. You could be barred from worship, shunned for days. But Jesus, he touches it without pause, because he's not afraid of death. And because holiness isn't fragile, the men carrying the bier freeze. And Jesus speaks not to the crowd, not to the mother, but to the boy. "Young man," he says, "I say to you, get up." There's no trumpet, no flash of light, just breath returning where it had stopped. The boy sits up and starts talking. That's your favorite part. He doesn't cough or gasp or stagger into awareness. He talks, as if he'd only been asleep. And Jesus, he gives him back to his mother, not just raised, but restored. You take that in slow and steady. Jesus didn't raise the boy to impress the town. He raised him because he couldn't stand to see the mother weep. That's compassion, not reactive. Initiating. Some scholars note that this is one of only 3 resurrection miracles Jesus performs: Jairus' daughter, this widow's son, and Lazarus. All different, all deeply personal. And this one, it happens without a request. That's rare. It means something. Sometimes the miracle doesn't come because you pray hard enough. It comes because he notices your pain. There's another layer too. In ancient Israel, a widow without sons was in economic danger. She'd have no protector, no property rights. She'd be forgotten. But Jesus, he doesn't just raise the dead. He preserves dignity. He protects the vulnerable. He sees the future inside the present's collapse. There's a quiet beauty in this. Everyone else was mourning what had ended. Jesus was already seeing what would begin again. You sit now beneath an old olive tree watching the city of Nain fade in the distance. You can still see the boy walking beside his mother, her hand gripping his like it's the only anchor in the universe. You remember her face, a face that held no hope that morning. And now light, not from the sky. From him, because he walked into her grief and spoke life where no one asked for it. Maybe that's your story too. Maybe you've been walking behind a funeral you didn't name, carrying disappointment, resigned. And he's about to meet you at the gate. Not because you prayed the right words, but because you're his. And he notices what the world ignores. The road out of Nain curves through fields of tall grass and stone markers, simple graves, some worn smooth by time and wind. The sky is overcast, now soft gray clouds like thick wool overhead. You walk with Jesus again, but this time you're inside a house. Quiet. Stone walls, a locked door, lamps flickering low in corners. Thomas is here. So are the others. But not everyone. Some are missing. It's been days since everything unraveled. The cross, the darkness, the earth shaking, the silence that followed. Then the resurrection. Whispers flew like birds from garden to city. He's alive. Some saw him. Some touched him. But Thomas? He missed it. He couldn't believe, not without proof. He said it out loud, too. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, I will not believe. And then here you are, behind closed doors, locked doors, because the disciples are still afraid. Roman authority still looms like a storm that forgot to pass. But fear doesn't stop Jesus. Locked doors don't slow him. Suddenly he's there. No knock, no rattle, just presence. He stands among them and says the same words he's been saying since he stepped out of the tomb. Peace be with you. It's not just a greeting. It's a gift, spoken into fear, offered like bread. And then he turns to Thomas. Right away. No delay. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. No shame in his voice. Just invitation. He doesn't lecture. Doesn't say you should have trusted your brothers. He just offers what Thomas asked for. And Thomas, he falls. My Lord and my God. The confession is total. It's the most direct acknowledgement of Jesus' divinity from any disciple. And it came not from blind faith, but from faith that wrestled. There's a quiet miracle here often overlooked. Not the resurrection itself, but that Jesus chose to come back for one man's doubt. One person. One locked room. One wounded soul. He didn't say he'll figure it out eventually. He returned specifically for Thomas. That's who Jesus is. The kind of savior who circles back for the slow to believe. Some theologians call this a grace miracle one, not of spectacle, but of patience. Jesus honored Thomas's journey, not just his arrival. Others suggest this moment is more than just comfort, it's a blueprint. That the church should embrace honest doubt, not shame it. Because doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It's the tension that faith grows inside of. There's also something beautiful in the setting. A locked room. And Jesus walks through it like light through mist. You carry that now because maybe you've locked some doors too. Maybe there are parts of your heart that are bolted shut with fear, regret, disappointment. And still, he enters, not with force, but with peace. He stands in the middle of your silence and says, touch what hurts, I can take it. And there's a softer detail still. Jesus still had his wounds. He could have risen flawless, but he didn't. He kept the scars not as reminders of pain, but as invitations to those still healing. So Thomas touches the proof and believes. And Jesus says, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That's you. That's now. That's this moment. Belief not from touch, but from trust. You close your eyes and feel the hush in that room. The way the light feels different when peace enters. The way Thomas exhales like he's been holding his breath for a lifetime. You don't need to see the wounds. You just need to know they're still there. Still speaking. Still reaching. Still ready to meet you. Even behind locked doors. The air feels different now. Not heavy, not bright. Just slow. You walk beside Jesus, but his face carries something solemn. Not sadness, but something like readiness. A knowing. A quiet strength humming underneath every breath. You're on the road to Bethany. And ahead lies a tomb. You know this story. Everyone does. But tonight you're going to feel it. Not the headline Lazarus lives, but the spaces in between, the grief, the delays, the miracle before the miracle. It starts with a message. Lord, the one you love is sick. Simple. No demands. Just news. A hope-filled update sent with trembling hands. And Jesus, he waits. 2 days. Not because he's lazy. Not because he didn't care. Because timing matters in heaven. This sickness will not end in death. He says no, it is for God's glory. But by the time he arrives, Lazarus is gone. 4 days gone. In Jewish custom, that's important. By day 4, there's no doubt. No mistaking coma for death. No lingering hope. It's over. And still Jesus walks toward the tomb. Martha comes first. Her words are half rebuke, half belief. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even in pain, she clings to something deeper. But I know, even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus answers with a promise. Your brother will rise again. She nods. Yes, someday, resurrection at the end. And then Jesus says something that tilts the world. I am the resurrection and the life, not just someday. Now, whoever believes in me will live even though they die. He looks into her eyes. Do you believe this? She does. Then Mary comes. She falls at his feet. Same words, same pain. Lord, if you had been here. But this time, Jesus weeps. You feel it in your chest. The shortest verse in the Bible. The fullest one. Jesus wept. He who knew what was coming. He who could call life from silence. Still wept. Not from helplessness, but from love. Some scholars say his tears were for their pain. Others say he wept at death itself, the intrusion of decay into his creation. Some even suggest he wept out of righteous frustration at the grip death had on those he loved. But one thing is sure, he wasn't distant. He entered the grief. And then he acts. They bring him to the tomb. A stone laid across the entrance, the scent of finality heavy in the air. He says, take away the stone. Martha flinches. Lord, by this time there is a bad odor. He's been there 4 days. But Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they move the stone, and Jesus prays. Not to ask, to thank. I knew that you always hear me. He says to the Father, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. And then the voice that spoke stars into place rises like thunder held in human lungs. Lazarus, come out. You wait. Hold your breath. And then, shuffling, footsteps wrapped in grave clothes. A man once dead, walking. Jesus says unbind him, let him go. That's the miracle. Not just that life returned, but that it had to be freed. You sit now by the edge of the tomb watching as people rush to unwrap their friend. Tears and laughter mixing like oil and wine. And you remember this? Jesus could have arrived on time. He could have healed Lazarus from a distance. But he waited. So the miracle would be bigger than healing. It would be resurrection. You carry that now into your own losses. The prayers you swore were too late. The hopes you buried with whispered eulogies. And now you wonder, what if the delay wasn't neglect? But preparation, what if he's still coming even when it feels like the stone is cold and sealed? Because sometimes God waits until there's no other way. So the only explanation left is glory. And you don't have to understand the waiting. You just have to roll away the stone and listen. Night settles like a veil, now soft and thick, the stars veiled behind a layer of cloud. You're walking toward an upper room not because of a miracle about to unfold, but because of one about to be tested. The table is already set. Bread, wine, the familiar creak of cushions being arranged on the floor. Candles flicker on the walls, casting long bending shadows. You can hear the voices, low murmurs, laughter, that strains to be normal, like no one wants to say what they all sense. Something's ending, and yet Jesus is calm. He takes his place at the table. His eyes move across the faces of friends, of students, of souls he's carried for years. And he knows who will stay, who will scatter, who will sell him. Still he breaks bread. Still he pours wine. Still he serves. And as the meal stretches, the conversation sharpens. He says, one of you will betray me. The room stills. They stare at one another, not in anger, but in disbelief. Surely not I, Lord. And he answers not with a name, but with a gesture. He who dips his hand into the bowl with me. You know who it is. You've always known. Who does? But Jesus doesn't name him with fury. He names him with grace. He still lets him eat. Still lets him sit. Still washes his feet. That's the miracle. Not thunder. Not lightning. But love held steady beside betrayal. Some scholars say this is the ultimate proof of Jesus' divine love, that he could share the sacred table with the one whose heart had already turned cold. Others argue it was part of the plan, that Judas was simply playing his role in a prophecy too deep to unwind. But don't miss this. Jesus gave him every chance to choose otherwise. He spoke warning. He offered proximity. He extended bread. In Jewish tradition, to share bread, especially personally handed bread, is to honor someone. And Jesus gave that honor to Judas. That's not naivety. That's divine compassion. A final attempt to reach a hand across the chasm. And Judas, he takes it, and still leaves. Into the night. That phrase lives in scripture like a door closing, and it was night. Of course it was. Night inside the room. Night inside his heart. Night across the whole city. And Jesus, he continues the meal, not shaken, not bitter. He lifts the cup and says, "This is my blood of the covenant poured out for many." He takes the bread and says, "This is my body broken for you." He looks at the rest of them, not just for who they are, but for who they'll become. He knows Peter will deny him. He knows Thomas will doubt. He knows the rest will run. But he stays, and feeds them anyway. You sit in that room now just beside the wall watching it unfold. The softness of his tone, the strength of his restraint, the beauty of a table that held both devotion and betrayal. And you understand something deep in your spirit. Miracles aren't always about power. Sometimes they're about presence. Sometimes the most divine thing a person can do is stay soft in the face of hurt. Sometimes the greatest sign of godliness is the refusal to harden when others turn away. Jesus doesn't protect himself from heartbreak. He welcomes it. He sits next to it. He shares a meal with it. And then he sings. That's the last detail most people miss. Before they leave for the garden, they sing a hymn, a song rising into night. Not of defeat, but of devotion. You hear it now even if you don't know the words. It hums beneath your breath like comfort, a God who sings even when betrayed. A Savior who feeds even those who wound him. A love that sets a table not for the worthy, but for everyone. The night is deeper now, thick, still, and yet something stirs beneath the silence like a distant drumbeat. You walk with him again, only this time there's no crowd, no city walls, no stage for wonders. There's just a man, silent, trapped, a prisoner in his own body. The story barely takes a paragraph. A man possessed by a demon so violent he couldn't speak, couldn't cry out, couldn't even ask to be healed. And that in itself is the miracle waiting to be noticed. Because this time there is no request, only presence. You see Jesus notice him. A figure in the shadows, eyes wild, jaw clenched, trembling not from cold, but from the war raging inside him. And Jesus doesn't question him, doesn't ask for background, doesn't demand repentance. He acts. He drives the spirit out with a word, and suddenly it's quiet. The man exhales like it's the first breath he's taken in years. His body stills, his chest rises, his hands unclench. And then the most understated line in the entire scene. He spoke. He speaks. It's such a simple sentence, but your spirit quakes beneath it. He speaks. After silence, after torment, after being the object of fear and avoidance, he speaks, and everyone around him marvels. Because they've seen him before, mute, manic, unpredictable, a threat to society, a burden to his family, a case study in failure. But now, he's whole, and he's talking. Some scholars wonder about the connection between speech and spirit. That when the demonic presence left, it wasn't just chaos that departed, it was silence that broke. Others point out the timing. This miracle happened immediately after another louder one. It almost reads like a footnote. But it's not, because Jesus doesn't just heal in public. He restores personhood in private. That's the lesson here. The man didn't need to beg. Jesus saw him, and healed what others didn't even know how to name. You feel that in your chest, the places you've kept quiet. Not because you don't care, but because you can't speak of them. Because some pain isn't loud. Some torment is mute. And yet Jesus notices. He hears what no one else can. The pain beneath your silence. The ache wrapped in your stillness. And he moves anyway. There's a gentle irony in this miracle too. The crowds are confused. They say nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. But others, religious leaders, proud and watchful, say, he casts out demons by the prince of demons. Accusation. Even after restoration. Even after peace. And Jesus, he doesn't retaliate. He doesn't explain himself. He moves on. Because sometimes proving yourself is the smallest use of power. And healing one soul, the highest. There's a subtle spiritual insight here often missed. In the Jewish worldview of the time, speaking had power. Words mattered. Blessings were spoken aloud. Names carried weight. silence could feel like exile. So when this man speaks, it isn't just breath and sound. It's return. Return to community. Return to humanity. Return to being known. And that right there is the miracle beneath the miracle. Not that the demon left, but that his voice returned. You sit now on a rock near the edge of the village, watching as the man now clothed calm, coherent laughs for the first time in what must have been years. You see children watch him from a distance, no longer afraid. You see a woman, maybe his sister, inching forward, eyes wide, tears already brimming. He calls her name, and she hears it. The silence is over, and you remember something deep inside. You don't have to shout to be saved. You don't need the words. You just need to be seen, and he sees you, even in the quiet. Especially in the quiet. The village fades behind you, and now the road bends upward toward a mountain. It's not the tallest, not the most famous, but there's a weight to it. The way the trees hush, the way the air thins just slightly, like even the breeze knows something is about to happen. Jesus walks ahead. Only 3 follow Peter, James, and John. You walk in silence behind them, your feet crunching over stone and dry pine needles. The sun is slipping lower, but it hasn't yet set. The sky is that soft moment between day and dusk when everything holds its breath. They reach the top. Jesus stands a little apart, and then it happens. No warning, no sound. He changes. His face begins to glow. Not like fire, not like sunlight. Something purer. His clothing becomes dazzling whiter than anything on earth could bleach. It's not light on him. It's light from him. And just as your mind starts to catch up, he's no longer alone. Moses is there. So is Elijah, the law and the prophets, the man who parted the sea and the man who called fire from the sky, standing beside the one who is both the fulfillment and the future. Peter, as always, tries to speak. Rabbi, it's good that we're here. Let us build 3 shelters. 1 for you, 1 for Moses, 1 for Elijah. He's trying to capture the holy, trying to hold the moment. But you can't build walls around glory. And then a cloud descends, thick, radiant, terrifying. You fall to your knees because something ancient stirs in the air. A voice comes not from Jesus, but from above. This is my son whom I love. Listen to him. It's the 2nd time the heavens have said this. The first was at the Jordan with water. This time, on a mountain with light. You blink and it's over. Moses and Elijah are gone. Jesus looks normal again, but nothing is the same. They walk back down the mountain quiet, changed. And Jesus says something strange. Don't tell anyone what you've seen until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. It's like watching the final scene of a movie, before it's even begun. You think back to Moses, who once climbed another mountain to see God's glory only to be hidden in a rock cleft. Now, that same glory walked with them. No veil, no distance. And Elijah the prophet, who never tasted death, swept up in a chariot of fire, now standing beside the one who will taste death for all. Some scholars call this the hinge moment, the center point of the Gospels, where Jesus stops simply teaching about the kingdom and reveals it. Others see it as a mirror to Sinai, but this time God doesn't hand down commandments. He hands down a person. This is my son, listen to him. Not do this, but hear him. You let that phrase settle in your chest. Because we're good at doing, busy with serving, eager to perform. But on the mountaintop, God doesn't ask for action. He asks for attention. Listen. And here's something quieter still. The disciples fell on their faces, not at the light, not at the figures, but at the voice. Because sometimes it's not the miracle that undoes you. It's the closeness of God speaking your name. You sit now at the base of that mountain dusk, falling like a warm blanket, the stars shyly blinking awake. You remember the glow. Not because it was bright, but because it told the truth. This man, your teacher, your healer, your friend. He isn't just a messenger. He's the message, wrapped in skin, brighter than any fire, closer than any command. And the miracle, he came back down the mountain. He didn't stay glowing on a summit. He walked back into the dirt, into the crowds, into the cross. Because the God of light still chooses to walk into darkness for you. The mountain is behind you, and the stars are wide open above. But Jesus walks forward downward, always downward. Glory fades into dust again, and the glow of transfiguration gives way to the ache of routine. You find yourself beside him after another miracle, after another teaching, after another escape from rising fame, because Jesus more than once walks away from crowds. And that's the miracle tonight. Not what he does, but what he refuses to chase. You watch him withdraw to a lonely place. Sometimes it's a mountaintop, sometimes the far side of a lake. sometimes the edge of a garden where olive trees bend low like bowing angels. And he prays. That's all. No spotlight, no healing, no parables. Just solitude, silence, stillness. But the crowds, they always find him, always press in. Even when he says don't tell anyone what happened, they tell everyone. And the people come, and still he walks away. Not out of irritation, but intention, because even for the Son of God, quiet matters. Some scholars point out how often Jesus withdraws, especially after major miracles, after feeding thousands, after healing lepers, after casting out demons. He retreats. He doesn't ride the wave. He steps off it. That alone is a revelation, because we live in a world that chases momentum, thrives on more, and measures value by volume. But Jesus, he often moves in the opposite direction of the applause. And in doing so, he teaches us something holy. Fame isn't the same as faithfulness. Noise isn't the same as presence. Even divinity needs space. There's a curious line in Luke's gospel: Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. The original Greek carries the sense of habit, not a one-time thing, not a retreat in crisis. A rhythm? You think about that now, your own rhythms. How often you run toward the noise, how little room you give your soul to breathe. But Jesus, even with thousands needing him, still steps away to be with the Father. Not to escape, to align. That's the miracle, a rhythm of refusal. To let the crowds define his pace, to let public need become a substitute for private presence. There's a soft, even humorous pattern in the disciples during these moments. They often search for him. Everyone is looking for you, they say, breathless, anxious, eager. And he replies, let's go somewhere else. Can you feel it? How it must have confused them. Why leave when the crowd loves you? Because love isn't always loud. Because healing every illness is not the same as fulfilling every purpose. Jesus didn't come to build a brand. He came to build believers. And believers aren't made in the rush. They're shaped in the quiet. You sit now in the shadow of a cedar tree, the night breeze brushing past like a whispered prayer. No crowds, no miracles. Just Jesus praying, breathing, resting. And you finally realize that too is divine. That too is miraculous. That the one who holds the stars still made time to be still. So you close your eyes and wonder, if the Son of God needed space to listen, what makes you think you don't? The quiet of solitude fades into conversation again, this time with shadows, with trick questions and sidelong glances. You're back among the crowds, but something has shifted. The curiosity is more pointed now. The air feels sharper, like words are being chosen not to learn but to trap. The Pharisees approach. Their robes swish, their brows are furrowed, their voices honeyed with calculation. Teacher, they begin, we want to see a sign from you. You almost laugh, because they've seen signs. They've watched the lame walk, the blind blink into color, the dead rise. They've tasted multiplied bread, watched demons flee, heard the wind go quiet at his word. And still they ask for a sign. Jesus doesn't get angry, but he doesn't entertain it either. He sighs. A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of Jonah. Jonah. That's not what they expected, but it's exactly what he meant. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. It's cryptic, mysterious, but not to you, because you're standing in the light of resurrection even if they aren't. Jesus is giving them the blueprint of what's coming, not in the form of spectacle, but of sacrifice. Not thunder, grave. Some scholars debate this response. Was Jesus frustrated? Was this an intentional rebuke? Or was he simply recentering the crowd? Others point to Jonah's story not just for its burial, but for its message. Jonah was sent to a Gentile city, a reluctant prophet offering reluctant mercy. Jesus, a willing savior offering undeserved grace. The sign of Jonah isn't just the tomb, it's the scandal of compassion. You feel that now, that Jesus refused to give them the performance they wanted. Because faith built on spectacle doesn't last. And spectacle without surrender, just noise. This is the miracle buried in his refusal. Jesus doesn't prove himself to people trying to trap him. He doesn't do tricks for the disingenuous. He honors hunger, not entitlement. And that's hard to hear. Because maybe you've been asking for signs. Maybe your prayers sound like, just give me one more thing and I'll believe. But he already gave everything. And when he speaks of Jonah, he's foreshadowing the greatest sign of all, the one that won't be seen until after the stones are rolled, after the blood has dried, after the silence of Saturday gives way to the tremble of Sunday morning. There's another layer here too. Jonah, after all, ran from his calling. Jesus ran toward it. Jonah preached reluctantly. Jesus embodied the message. And Jonah sat under a vine angry that God forgave. Jesus hung on wood pleading that we would be. The contrast is deliberate, because the Pharisees wanted proof. Jesus offered prophecy. And prophecy always requires patience. You sit now under a fig tree, its fruit just beginning to bloom, wondering what signs you've missed, because you were looking for fireworks. You remember that some of God's greatest wonders aren't loud? They're woven into waiting, into whisper, into 3 days in darkness. And still, light wins. So when you hear yourself whisper, "Lord, show me a sign," listen for the answer wrapped not in thunder, but in Jonah's echo. He's already given the sign, a savior who would disappear for 3 days, only to rise again. For you, the wind shifts. A coolness rides through the hills, curling around the edge of the village. You walk with Jesus again, but this time you're not close. You're watching from a distance as 10 men stand just outside the town, boundaries, cloaks, torn faces, hidden voices rising in rough unison. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Leprosy again. But not one man, 10. A collective exile, a tribe of the rejected. You can't tell where one affliction ends and the next begins because they've become a single sorrow. They've lived on the fringe of life, sleeping in caves, eating scraps, whispering stories about the one who healed others. And now he walks their way. They don't dare approach. They know the law. They know the distance they're supposed to keep. But they shout anyway, "Have mercy." Not heal us. Not make us clean. Just mercy. And Jesus doesn't walk over, doesn't touch them, doesn't even stop. He calls back, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." That's it. A command, a test, a strange assignment. Because in that time, healing wasn't considered official until a priest confirmed it. You couldn't return to society family worship, or even your name, until you were declared clean. But Jesus tells them to go before anything has changed. That's the miracle hiding here. They're still broken, still scarred, still sick. But they walk, and as they go, they are healed. Not at the word, not on the spot, but in motion. You feel that in your chest, the obedience that must have cost them everything. To leave as they were believing they'd return as someone new. To trust healing would catch up to their feet. Somewhere between step 1 and step 10, the numbness fades. The skin clears, the fingers flex, the agony lifts. They begin to look at one another, eyes wide, hands inspecting what was once rotted. Jaws drop, shouts rise. But only one, he stops. He turns back. A Samaritan, an outsider among outsiders. He runs to Jesus not to ask, but to thank, to fall at his feet, to worship. And Jesus, he notices. Were not all 10 cleansed, he asks. Where are the other 9? Then to the man before him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. Some translations say whole. Whole? There's something more than healing in those words. The 9 were cured, but only one was changed. That's the miracle beneath the miracle. Gratitude isn't just a response. It's a door to deeper restoration. Some scholars note the phrasing. The Greek word used sozo means not just physical healing, but salvation, deliverance, total renewal. The others got their skin back. This one, he got his soul back. There's another soft truth here. Jesus sent all 10 away, knowing 9 might not return. He healed anyway. Because grace isn't a transaction. It doesn't demand thanks, but it notices when it's returned. You sit now under a tamarisk tree watching the man walk away into the fading light, whole in a way the others may never understand. And you ask yourself, am I walking with a miracle and forgetting to turn back? Am I living in answered prayer but still rushing ahead? Jesus doesn't scold the 9. He doesn't revoke the healing, but he honors the one who came back. Because worship is never wasted, and even a single thank you in a world of silence touches heaven. The road curves gently through Jericho now, and the heat lays low like a blanket over the stone walls and crooked alleyways. Palm branches wave lazily in the breeze. Children chase chickens between stalls. It's loud, cluttered, ordinary. And somewhere above all of it, a man climbs a tree. You almost miss him. He's small, fast, sharp eyes, quick hands, climbing like he's done it since childhood. His name is Zacchaeus, a tax collector. Not just any tax collector, chief tax collector, wealthy, powerful, and hated, because he didn't just take money. He took it for Rome. And he didn't just work the system. He was the system. You feel the tension around his name, how people spit it like a curse. How children are pulled inside when he walks past. How no one sees the man, just the money, the betrayal, the corruption. But today, he climbs, not to escape, to see, because Jesus is passing by. And something inside Zacchaeus, something old, buried, unsatisfied, stirs. He just wants to glimpse the man everyone's talking about. No miracles asked, no requests made, just a quiet longing beneath the gold of his tunic. And then Jesus stops, right beneath the sycamore fig tree, looks up, and says the unthinkable. "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today." You hear the crowds inhale like the wind sucked out of the street. He's the last person anyone expected to be singled out, let alone invited, let alone dignified. But Jesus, he walks straight past the holy men, the synagogue goers, the outwardly righteous, and chooses the one who climbed a tree to see from a distance. Zacchaeus doesn't hesitate. He climbs down and welcomes Jesus with joy, genuine, overflowing, childlike joy. And then another miracle, a transformation. Zacchaeus stands up right there in front of his neighbors and enemies and announces, "Look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I will repay them 4 times over." Jesus never told him to do this. There was no command, no lecture, just presence, and Zacchaeus is changed. Some scholars suggest this moment fulfills the prophecy in Ezekiel 34, where God promises to seek out the lost sheep, to bring back the strayed, to bind up the injured. Others point to this as a final poetic miracle, not of healing the body, but of redeeming a soul others had written off. Jesus says it plainly, "Today salvation has come to this house. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Not the worthy, not the faithful, the lost. There's a gentle irony here too. Zacchaeus thought he was the one doing the looking, climbing higher to get a glimpse. But in truth, he was the one being sought. Jesus already knew his name, already knew where he'd be, already had a seat waiting at his table. And maybe you've been climbing too, trying to find a better vantage point, to see Jesus without being seen. But he stops, looks right at you, and says, "Come down," because he's not content to stay distant. He doesn't wave politely from the road. He moves into your home, into your mess, into your reputation, however shattered. That's the miracle buried in Jericho dust. God isn't looking for saints. He's looking for those who are still looking for him, even from a tree, even with trembling fingers and a past full of regret. You sit now at the foot of that sycamore, watching the sun dip low behind rooftops, casting long shadows that look like stretched out arms. And you realize, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is climb a tree, just high enough to see the one who's been seeing you all along. The sycamore fades behind you, and now the road climbs steep toward Jerusalem. The noise of the city builds in layers, donkeys braying sandals, scuffing stone market sellers calling out prices between prayers. But Jesus walks steadily through it, all eyes fixed not on the city itself, but on what waits inside it. A beggar cries out near the gate. Another man shouts from a rooftop. But it's not those voices that stir you now. It's the sound of someone running. A man, ragged, disheveled, frantic. He drops to his knees before Jesus, breathless. His daughter is dying. Jairus, a synagogue leader. He's used to reverence, to order, but today he throws protocol aside. He pleads, "Come please, my little girl, she's only 12. And Jesus goes with him. But the road is slow, crowded, interrupted. You've already seen the pause along the way, the bleeding woman who reached for his garment, stealing healing in faith and silence. But this is what happens after the delay. After the time runs out, a messenger arrives. You see it in his face before he speaks. "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." The words hang like fog in the air. Final. Heavy, but Jesus, he turns to Jairus and says gently, "Don't be afraid, only believe. She will be healed." And they keep walking. To the house, to the mourning, to the disbelief. They arrive to a scene soaked in grief, professional mourners wailing, people shouting, chaos thick in the air. Jesus walks in and says something that stops everyone cold. "She's not dead, she's asleep." They laugh, not kindly, but with the bitterness of people who've stopped believing in hope. And Jesus, he sends them out, all of them. Only Peter, James, John, and the girl's parents remain. The room is quiet now, still. The girl lies motionless, pale, and then Jesus kneels, takes her hand, and speaks 2 words in Aramaic. "Talitha kum," "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And she does. She opens her eyes, sits up, breathes, smiles, and the room once full of wailing is filled with wonder. Jesus tells them not to tell anyone. Then he says, "Give her something to eat." That small command grounds the miracle in reality. Because resurrection isn't just spiritual, it's personal. The girl is alive, but now she's hungry. That's the kind of savior you follow. One who doesn't just bring you back from death, but makes sure you're fed when you wake up. Some scholars highlight the contrast here, the crowd's mockery versus the parents' faith. That belief is often born after you're asked to walk into a room full of doubt. Others note the tenderness in Jesus' words. Little girl was a term of affection, not just rise. But rise, my dear one. You feel it now. How every miracle has layers. The healing, the timing, the refusal to let death have the last word. You sit now in that room watching the girl eat, watching her mother cry softly, not from fear but from joy too big to hold. And you remember all the places in your life you thought were too far gone, too late, too final. But with Jesus, even delay can become divine. Even death can become interrupted. Because he walks toward your grief, he enters your waiting, and he brings with him words that death has no answer for. So don't be afraid, only believe. He's still saying she's only asleep, and he still takes hands. And he still says, get up. The journey winds toward its end now, not with a crowd, not with applause, but with footsteps heavy on stone and breath caught between memory and glory. You walk behind Jesus one more time, past vineyards asleep in moonlight, past gates now quiet, past the echo of voices who once shouted Hosanna and would soon cry crucify. But this isn't that moment yet. This is after pain, after the garden, after the grave. You're on the shore of Galilee, and Peter is fishing. He's not preaching, he's not healing, he's not walking on water or raising the dead. He's just fishing. Because after everything, after the denials, after the cross, after the empty tomb, Peter returns to what he knew before. To nets, to water, to the same sea where it all began. The others are with him, casting and hauling, and catching nothing. All night, until morning, and then a voice from the shore. Friends, have you caught anything? They don't recognize him. Not yet. Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. It sounds ridiculous, but they do it. And suddenly fish. So many they can barely pull it in. John squints through the dawn and says softly, "It is the Lord." And Peter doesn't wait. He throws on his cloak and jumps in. He swims not to escape but to arrive. Because when Jesus stands on the shore, you run toward him. Even through water, even after shame, even when you're soaking wet with regret. And when Peter reaches him, Jesus isn't holding judgment. He's holding breakfast. Bread and fish cooking over a fire. The same food from the first miracle. The same warmth that once fed thousands. Now offered for one man. They eat in silence. Holy silence. And then when they finish, Jesus turns to Peter and asks, "Do you love me?" 3 times. Once for every denial. Each question followed by an invitation. Feed my sheep. Take care of my lambs. Follow me. That's the final miracle. Not resurrection from death, but restoration from failure. Peter wasn't just forgiven. He was recalled, recommissioned, re-anchored. Jesus didn't bring up the past to rub it in. He brought it up to redeem it, to remind Peter that love is louder than shame. Some theologians say this is the true closing of the gospel story, Jesus not just rising, but returning to those who betrayed him, not to scold, but to restore. Others note the charcoal fire. Only one other moment in Scripture describes that, the fire where Peter denied him. Now by another fire, Jesus offers him a second chance, and Peter takes it. He doesn't hide. He doesn't excuse. He says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus believes him. You sit now by that same fire warmth on your face, the sea whispering behind you. You've carried your own regrets, your own 3-fold failures, your own bitter nights of "I should have," and here's Jesus. Not keeping score, just asking, "Do you love me? If you do, then feed, then follow. Then come walk the shore with me again, because this isn't the end. It's the beginning again. Just like it was the first time, only now you know. Now you've seen. Now you've walked through every silent miracle, each one quieter than thunder but stronger than death. Each one a reminder. He heals the unseen. He notices the ignored. He waits for the doubters. He lifts the dead. He feeds the denier. And he never stops calling your name, even when you're hiding in the boat, even when you've locked the door, even when you've convinced yourself you're too late. He still comes to shore, still breaks bread, still says, "Follow me." So now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let the weight of every sign and wonder settle like fog over your chest. You've walked the whole road, touched every hem, heard every whisper, watched the dead sit up, watched the bread multiply, watched the man who is God kneel down again and again for the one. For you, let that truth lull you now. Let it wrap around your spine like a promise too soft to forget. He is still speaking, still healing, still walking toward you, even now, especially now. So close your eyes and rest. You're already in his arms. Now the light fades completely. No more hills, no more crowds, no more steps to take, only the quiet hum of peace. Only the soft breath of the one who has walked beside you since the beginning of this story. You can feel him near now, not in spectacle, but in presence, not above you, but with you, like a hand resting gently on your shoulder, like a voice not speaking, but knowing. All the miracles you've heard tonight weren't just stories. They were invitations to believe again, to rest again, to be made whole in all the places that still tremble beneath your skin. So now let your thoughts grow slower. Let your breathing deepen. Let the silence cradle you like a psalm sung in the dark. He's not asking anything of you now. No tasks, no performance, no proving, just trust, just stillness. Just a savior who walked on water, fed strangers, touched lepers, wept beside graves, and then walked back from his own. And now, he watches over you as you sleep, not because you earned it, but because you're his. So drift, child of heaven, your story is known, your future is held, and all the miracles, they're still happening, even now, even here. End of script. Sweet dreams.